The silence inside the examination room was so heavy that it almost felt alive. The young woman sitting on the edge of the hospital bed kept both hands tightly folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor as though looking up might shatter the fragile courage she had spent years trying to build. Across from her stood one of the country's most respected physicians, a man whose name appeared in medical journals, business magazines, and charity foundations alike. He had saved countless lives, performed impossible surgeries, and built a fortune that most people could only dream about. Yet nothing in his remarkable career could have prepared him for the words he was about to hear. The millionaire doctor stared at the trembling medical file before slowly lifting his eyes toward the frightened patient. In a voice barely louder than a whisper, she revealed a truth that stopped time itself. At 28 years old, no man had ever touched her, not because she wanted to be alone, but because life had stolen every opportunity to feel safe enough to let anyone come close. In that heartbreaking moment, the doctor realized he was no longer facing an ordinary medical case. He was standing before a soul that had spent an entire lifetime hiding from a world that had never shown her kindness. Before we continue this emotional journey, take a moment to support stories that remind us compassion still exists. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the healing power of humanity, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us continue bringing inspiring stories to people around the world. Dr. Adrian Hayes had everything the world admired. He owned luxurious homes overlooking the ocean, drove cars that most people only saw in magazines, and had built a private medical center that attracted patients from every corner of the country. Newspapers called him the miracle doctor because of his extraordinary success in treating complex illnesses. Wealth followed him wherever he went, but despite all the applause and recognition, his personal life remained strangely empty. Every evening, after another exhausting day of saving lives, he returned to a silent mansion where expensive furniture and breathtaking artwork failed to fill the loneliness echoing through every room. His parents had taught him that true success was measured by the number of lives improved, not by the numbers in a bank account. He had never forgotten those lessons, even after becoming one of the richest doctors in the nation. Every Friday, regardless of his demanding schedule, Adrian insisted on personally examining patients who could not afford expensive medical treatment. Many of his colleagues questioned why someone of his status continued volunteering in the hospital's charity clinic. They believed his time was too valuable for ordinary consultations. Adrian simply smiled whenever they asked. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that medicine was never supposed to become a business alone. It was meant to restore hope where hope had disappeared. That Friday morning seemed completely ordinary until a nurse quietly knocked on his office door. She handed him a thin patient file with an expression unlike anything he had seen before. There was sadness in her eyes, mixed with concern that words could not explain. The patient's name was Emily Carter. She was 28 years old, worked part-time in a small public library, and had been referred for an examination after experiencing severe abdominal pain that had become impossible to ignore. The medical notes were unusually brief, almost as if previous doctors had struggled to understand her situation. When Adrian entered the examination room, he immediately noticed something different. Emily wasn't simply nervous. She looked terrified. Her oversized sweater seemed chosen not for comfort but to hide herself from the world. Loose strands of chestnut hair covered part of her face, and every movement suggested someone constantly preparing for danger. She apologized repeatedly for taking up the doctor's valuable time, even before he had asked a single question. It broke his heart to see someone feeling guilty simply for needing medical care. As Adrian gently reviewed her symptoms, he realized Emily answered every question carefully, almost fearfully, as though saying the wrong thing might bring punishment. Years of treating trauma survivors had taught him to recognize silent suffering. Physical pain often hid emotional wounds much deeper than any medical scan could reveal. Routine examinations required simple physical contact, yet every time Adrian reached forward to check her pulse or examine her abdomen, Emily instinctively pulled away before immediately apologizing again. Her entire body reacted as though human touch itself had become something dangerous. It wasn't rejection. It was fear so deeply rooted that even she seemed unable to control it. Adrian slowed everything down. There was no rush. He spoke gently, explaining every step before moving, giving her complete control over the examination. Minutes passed before Emily's breathing became steady enough for her to allow the simplest medical procedures. Even then, tears quietly gathered in the corners of her eyes. Her medical results revealed something unexpected. Several important examinations had never been completed because she had avoided hospitals for years. Some tests that most women received during early adulthood had never happened at all. Adrian carefully asked whether previous experiences had made medical treatment difficult. Emily remained silent for nearly a full minute. Then, with her eyes fixed on the floor, she whispered the sentence that would stay with Adrian forever. She admitted that no man had ever touched her. Not a boyfriend. Not a husband. Not even a simple comforting embrace from someone who genuinely cared about her. The room became impossibly quiet. Adrian didn't react with surprise on his face because years of professional training had taught him never to judge a patient's personal life. But inside, countless questions rushed through his mind. This wasn't about romance. This was about fear. About isolation. About years of invisible suffering. He gently encouraged her to continue only if she felt comfortable. Slowly, painfully, Emily began revealing pieces of a life that few people could imagine. She had grown up in a small rural town where poverty consumed every dream before it had a chance to bloom. Her father had abandoned the family before she could even remember his face. Her mother worked endless hours cleaning houses while battling chronic illness. Childhood should have been filled with laughter, birthday parties, and bedtime stories. Instead, Emily spent most afternoons caring for her sick mother, cooking simple meals, and worrying whether there would be enough money to keep the electricity on. Because she wore old clothes and rarely spoke in school, classmates mocked her relentlessly. They laughed at her worn shoes, her quiet voice, and the lunches she sometimes didn't have. Every cruel joke slowly convinced her that she wasn't worthy of friendship. She stopped making eye contact. She stopped raising her hand in class. Eventually, she stopped believing anyone could ever genuinely care about her. When her mother died shortly after Emily's 18th birthday, the little confidence she still possessed disappeared completely. She buried herself in work, accepting every small job she could find just to survive. Years passed without birthdays being celebrated or holidays shared with loved ones. She rented a tiny apartment where silence became her closest companion. The library eventually hired her because books never judged people. Between dusty shelves and faded novels, Emily found temporary peace. Fictional characters became the friends she never had. Love stories filled her imagination even though she secretly believed such happiness belonged only to other people. She admitted she had received attention from men a few times, but overwhelming anxiety always forced her to run away before conversations could grow into relationships. Every compliment felt impossible to believe. Every act of kindness seemed suspicious. Somewhere deep inside, she remained the frightened little girl convinced she wasn't worthy of affection. Adrian listened without interrupting. As she spoke, he realized her greatest illness wasn't hidden inside medical reports. It was loneliness. Years of loneliness so profound that even ordinary human touch had become unfamiliar. When the consultation finally ended, Adrian assured Emily they would complete every necessary examination at her own pace. Nothing would happen without her full understanding and consent. For the first time in many years, someone had looked beyond her symptoms and seen the frightened human being carrying invisible scars. As Emily slowly left the office, she paused at the doorway for just a second. She looked back. For the first time since entering the hospital, there was the smallest hint of hope in her eyes. Neither of them realized that this meeting would transform both of their lives in ways neither money nor medicine could ever explain. Outside the hospital windows, heavy rain began falling across the city, washing the streets below. Adrian stood quietly watching the storm, unaware that the greatest challenge of his extraordinary career had only just begun.